Hey, welcome everybody to the Here podcast. So excited to have Bryan Hurd on with us today. Say hello.
Hello, Mike. Hello, everybody.
So good to be with you.
Yeah.
Bryan and I, we go back a few years now,
Yeah.
and met at one of those pivotal, like you were a hinge point moment for me, meeting you and then experiencing the Evolution Project retreat that you so kindly persuaded me to join.
Well, thank you for saying yes.
Yeah.
Did take a little persuasion, though,
It
didn't it?
did. It did. I have referred to this many times. The first men's retreat I was invited to, I resisted. I
Mhm.
resisted. And I know you run into that, every so often, or
Yeah.
maybe all the time. I'm not sure. But
Yeah. Well, but I think that's normal, though, Mike.
yeah,
I mean,
for
the
sure.
concept of resistance and the invitation always, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think everybody can relate to that. They sit down and they're like, yeah, absolutely. There's been things in my life where I've said no up front,
Yeah.
and then later on came back to it and like, man, I wish I would have. What would my life look like if I would have said yes? Whatever.
Sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
But
Well, let's start with just a little bit about who you are and what you're doing.
yeah.
I already mentioned the Evolution Project. I'd love to hear kind of the genesis of that,
Yeah.
and any other context that's helpful,
Okay.
interesting. Yeah,
This would actually be a good place for me to kind of give some shout outs to some people because the
sure.
reality is like we're always standing on somebody's shoulders
Yeah,
in the past of something, right?
for sure.
Uh, we live in such an interesting time and space of life where it's like, I don't know if anything is new. There is
Mhm.
so much content and information. And, you start to realize like this person was a disciple of this person, was a disciple of this person. And you're going back, and it always comes back to these like Napoleon Hill and Stephen R. Covey.
Mhm.
And there's a guy named Orson something. I can't remember his name, but a lot of these people reference these people in the past. So for me, how that worked for me was I've always had good mentors in my life.
Mhm.
Um, Kurt Frankham, who is a good
Mm.
friend of yours, and I think he just came to your guys' retreat
He was
recently.
at our last one. Yeah.
Okay, so Kurt Frankham, who does the Leading Saints podcast,
Hmm.
I met him years and years and years ago at a BNI chapter. And at that time, he was building websites of all things.
Sorry, BNI.
BNI is Business Networking International.
Okay.
And so I met him. I mean, we're talking like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were both in totally different places of life. We became friends. I sell real estate. That's what I've done for my profession.
Yep.
And anyway, fast forward. He had Doug Nielsen on his podcast years ago.
Mm.
Doug Nielsen is the guy that was the founder of Warrior Heart, who is kind of a disciple of, I'm drawing a blank, but I can see the guy's face. He wrote Wild at Heart.
Yeah. Yeah. With the archetypes, the masculine archetypes.
No, different.
Oh.
This guy's like he's like a Christian based guy.
Oh. Okay.
Um, and I really can't think of his name right now, but it'll come to me at some point. But
Okay.
anyway, he started this thing and he kind of put like an LDS twist on it,
Mhm.
but it was more like he kept it kind of Christian based.
Okay.
Kind of like, hey, we should do this in Utah. So this was like 2017. So I go to that. Kurt Franco and I were bunk mates.
Nice.
And, it was at this camp that was up by Huntsville. And it was a 3-day experience. And it was kind of like my first real taste of men's work, quote
Mhm.
unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that blew my mind after 3 days is like, I was blown away about uh, how the culture was created so quickly.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know anyone up there other than Kurt. And by the end, I mean, you have conversations at lunch and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, this is like a really cool experience. I definitely felt like God kind of tapped my heart in that moment where it was like, hey, dude, you've been thinking about doing something like this. This is a good framework for you to kind of work forward. Now,
Mm.
here's how everything works, at least for me. The seed was planted a long time ago.
Mhm.
I went to that. We talk about the invitation.
Mhm.
My heart was tapped. And then shortly after that, we found out we were pregnant
Mm.
with our fourth child, which there's a 10-year gap between our third and our fourth child,
Oh wow.
which was a total surprise. And I kind of just got back into work. I got back into, oh my gosh, we're having an unexpected child. And I tabled it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, time goes on and we find ourselves in COVID.
Mm.
And COVID gave a lot of people time to think.
Yeah.
And, the example that I gave, I think of COVID, is like everyone got sent to their bedrooms and we just got to sit with ourselves.
For better or worse.
Well, really, I mean, if you look at that, a lot of people, you start really evaluating, like, do I like my job?
Mm-hmm.
How's my marriage going?
Yeah.
Do I like where I live? Is this really what I want to do with my life?
Yeah.
A kind of existential questions. And for me, the question that came up is like, Bryan, you have talked about this forever. You've thought about it forever. So when are you really going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what I know about myself is I'm a good starter to like 75%. But that last 20, 25% is always over the edge. And there's always a good excuse of why
Mm-hmm.
the last 25% doesn't get done. Because we're busy, because it's a side hustle, because,
Yep.
right? And COVID was the time where I was just like, no more excuses.
Hmm.
And, I've told this story before, but the short version of the story is a good friend reached out to me on a day that was a down day for me. And I was just frustrated with everything. I was definitely frustrated ultimately with myself,
Yep.
And she asked she asked me some just really good questions. Her name is Michelle. She's someone I've known for over a decade. And she too was a coach herself. And she called me just to check in as a friend would check in. And I almost just skipped the conversation with her. I almost just said, yeah, I'm doing fine. Yeah, COVID sucks. Stay safe. Hope you do good too. Let me know if you need anything. Surface, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment, I actually had a real conversation with her. And I told her all the things that have been weighing on my heart for years. To the point where, like, I was crying in the conversation with her on the phone. I had all these built-up emotions that I just had never given myself space to process. And the feeling of failure, the feeling of judgment against myself for not doing something I knew I should do, like I was called to do, and ignoring the call, right? And at the end of the call, she said, so what are you going to do about it? And at first, I didn't want to answer the question. I wanted to be mad still. And I was like, there's nothing I can do about it. We're trapped in our houses, blah, 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 blah. Story, story, story. Justify, justify, justify. And then she said, that must be a horrible place to be in. And then she said, do you want to do anything about it? And then I was like, yes, of course I do. And I ended up hiring her to be my accountability coach. And for the next 4 months, every Thursday, I had a call with her for roughly an hour. And she would just say, what's next? What's next? And the first thing she asked me to do is she said, well, if you're going to do an event, you got to have a date. And you need to, do you want to self-fund this, or do you want to try to pay for it, with people coming? I'm like, I don't even know how much it was cost. So we sat down. We're like, okay, I still had no idea where I was going to do it, but I picked a date. And then she made me make a list of 10 people. And one of the people that I called, one of the first people I called, I mean, I wish I would have recorded it, because, like, looking back, I bet the call was like worse even than I remember. But I remember I was like, hey, Blake, I'm kind of doing this thing. If you want to come, it'd be really cool. It's going to be on this date, but I'm not sure where it's at yet. And I'm still working on doing it. And then I said, there's going to be a cost to it, but you don't have to pay me if you don't want to. Like, I literally went back on everything.
Yeah.
And fortunately, my friend, who is a good, true friend, said, yeah, I'll be there. And I told him it was going to be $1,000. And I get off the phone and bing, the Venmo comes in. He did it immediately.
That's awesome.
And I call her and I go, Michelle, guess what? Someone said yes. And then her first line was so good. She goes, good. Now you won't quit.
Nice.
And I remember thinking, yeah, sometimes to throw my hat over the fence. I wish I could say I'm just so principled and self-driven that it doesn't matter what anyone would say or think. But knowing that someone I respected and trusted and loved had set aside time, vested in it, and said, yeah, I'll go. It was a boost of confidence for me, and it was okay, now the work's really going to begin.
Yeah. What a motivator.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to call him and tell him, hey, Blake, remember this thing I told you about?
Right.
Well, we're not really going to do it.
Right.
And so it was a really great lesson for me in life, both on my side where I was at, where it was like, be vocal, like say what you want, give voice to it.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other side, it was like the best thing that we can do when somebody has an idea that is so new and fresh, right? It's like a little baby bird.
Mm-hmm.
Just nourish it.
Yeah.
Don't tell them the 100 things that would make them want to quit up front, right? Like you have perspective now that you've done men's work for years. That quite possibly, if you would have known up front, you might have been like, do I really want to do this? Or like, man, this is actually taking way more effort than I thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
I joke around and say that when I do men's work, I say that, I say, I'm greatly undercompensated
Right.
for the work that I do.
Nice.
But I don't do it for that.
Right.
And then I sell real estate. And there's times where I feel like I am greatly overcompensated for the work that I'm doing.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
But I kind of feel like that's God's way of saying like, hey, Bryan, I'll help you sell some houses.
Mm-hmm.
We'll keep the lights on.
Right.
And I don't expect you to quit your job in real estate to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I do want you to do this, but I'll take care of you.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So you started this thing that's now called the Evolution Project.
The Evolution Project.
So tell us just a little bit about what that is.
Yeah.
And kind of the purpose behind it, the intention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Soul work, man.
Soul work. Yeah.
Carl Jung.
Mm-hmm.
I joke around and say there's these people, right? Like in the LDS church, there's apostles.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in the men's workspace, there are people's names that you just hear over and over and over again.
Yep.
Right? Carl Jung, John Wineland, somebody, or David D. I can't say his last name. But there's these men that you keep hearing. Eckhart Tolle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Michael Singer.
Yep.
These people that. So Carl Jung says, until you make the subconscious conscious, it will go about directing your life, and you'll write it off as fate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I think most of us in our human state. Okay, wait. I'm actually going to say what the Evolution Project is. So the Evolution Project is, I tell people, it's an inward compression for an outward expansion. It's a 2-day men's retreat where we introduce you to some different modalities that silence the mind, merge the longest journey between the head and the heart. Because I don't believe it's a fully heartful. I don't believe we live our life fully in our heart, and I don't believe we live our heart fully in our head. And the advantages is like when we can find union between the head and the heart, we can start to really get some traction and some awareness and consciousness to our life. And now all of a sudden we're not living subconsciously. We're
Right.
not living in this unaware
Reactive, unaware, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're actually taking accountability and ownership in our life and realizing like, this is one of the things I was going to chat with you about is like this concept of like, what is the environment the ego lives in? What does the ego need? Because the ego, to a certain extent, there's been things that have served us with our ego in life, right?
Right.
But left unchecked, the ego can really keep us in a cage quite a bit, right?
Totally.
And so, a conversation. So we evolve with the Evolution Project, right? There's a baseline thing that we're doing, but really what we're trying to do is the container. The idea of it is we want to introduce ideas, have discussion, have direct experience, and then have periods of time where you can upload.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, it doesn't matter what I tell you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
If I truly believe that we're always on to ourselves, which I do believe, the most important thing I can do is create an environment for you to actually give voice to. And maybe at first it's in your journal, but something magical happens When I say to Michelle out loud, I just said, I feel like I'm dying inside and I don't know what to do. That's what I said to her. That was my truth.
Yeah.
Behind all of the anger, right? Because we move through these emotions. I've always found that for me, anger, my subconscious knows that if I want to hide stuff from Bryan, I will hide it behind anger. Because anger is the hardest emotion for me to tap into. Because I want to be nice, because I want to love other people, because I don't want to hurt other people.
Right.
So anger is a great emotion. And so after I got through my anger with Michelle, what was right behind it? The truth, the sadness. And the sadness was I was dying inside. I had this wonderful thing that I wanted to share with the world called the Evolution Project, right? That I just kept to me because I was scared. What if I reveal the most important thing to me and people don't care?
Yeah.
What am I then? Am I not important anymore? Is the thing that's most privately universal to me not worthy of, does no one see value in it? What would I be then?
Right. Then what does it mean about
Then what
you?
does it mean about me?
Right. Exactly.
So, like leading into this conversation, like egoic, right? I believe the ego lives in three places. This is like Eckhart Tolle-esque with Michael Singer like spliced in.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, it's very real for me.
Sure.
And I believe that through direct experience is how we embed awareness, and direct experience is how we embed. Right. And then we start acting in a way where it's like, oh, I'm consciously wearing my WrestleMania t-shirt.
An excellent conscious choice.
I feel great about it. My conscious and subconscious feel great about it. My higher self loves it.
There's alignment.
Yes. So like the ego lives in identity.
Yeah.
Which we talk about masks. What are the masks that Mike wears? What are the masks that I wear?
Yep.
Privately universal. You think these masks that you wear, like, oh, I got to have everything figured out.
Yep.
Or I'm the funny guy. Or, right, like fill in the mask.
Yep.
Right?
We all have them.
We all have them. So that's really just your identity.
Right.
And it's a false identity.
Yeah.
Because it's just something that I want the world to see me as. And for a long time, Mike, the truth is, a lot of the reason I hid behind the evolution, I hid the Evolution Project because I'm like, what would happen to my real estate business if people knew that I was really doing the Evolution Project? Would they still call me?
Right.
What would happen if I shared something really personal to me and I put it out there?
Right.
And someone found that out about me?
Yep.
Like, would they still call me when they want to buy or sell a house? Or are they like, Bryan's kind of in this finding himself stage and I don't know what to do. And you know what the truth is? That might have happened.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's possible.
But it's absolutely possible. And I'm actually okay with it.
Right.
Right? So identity.
Yep.
The second thing is attachment to outcome. And I, guilty as charged, dude.
Yeah.
Because what was my attachment? Why didn't I ever release the Evolution Project? Identity, but then there was attachment outcome. What if I share something that's really private and sacred to me and nobody cares?
Right.
What if, Mike?
Yeah.
What if it doesn't fulfill the thing? What if I schedule an Evolution Project and we don't have enough people sign up?
Right.
Which happens.
Yep.
It happens.
Yep.
And it's like, now go a level deeper in that. Where does attachment to outcome show up the most in a man's life? What do you think, Mike? Where's it showing up for you?
Oh, I mean, I think there's it's in relationships, it's in career.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's I think it shows up like I could see it almost everywhere if I really like dig,
The question I have found is when I start to get awareness around attachment to outcome, I'm like, so then what is a goal anymore?
Right.
And then I start landing in this place where I'm like, well, are goals good?
Right.
And what I've realized is goals aren't bad. They're actually not bad.
Yeah.
Because it might trigger a different way you show up when you have a vision that's bigger, right?
For sure.
If me and you sat down and said, okay, dude, we're going to do a Here Brotherhood event and we want 100 men to come. We're actually operating very differently
right.
than if we said, we want 20 guys to come.
Or we'll just see. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
we'll just see what happens.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Because now we're like, we got to get a venue that could hold 100 people. We got to have facilitators
Mm-hmm.
that can hold the space for that.
Right.
We got logistics with food and sleeping arrangements and, right? Fill in the blank.
Yep.
Okay. So I don't think goals are bad, but I think if you attach it and say, if 100 people come, then I'm a good, then I'm a good men's work leader.
It's the meaning of it, right? Yeah.
But if I say, no, I'm actually going to do this because I want this to be the grandest expression of love that I want to give to men that are hurting,
Mm-hmm.
men that need an awareness, an awakening.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the best job I can in giving that to them. And my impact would be if I could impact 100 men on this thing,
Right.
I would feel like I'm living my purpose. And then have the and in there. And I'm open to more men coming. But I'm going to show up 100%.
Yeah.
That's at the core. That's the outcome. So the attachment outcome is will I play full out no matter what?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm embedded, right? I'm living my life mission. I'm playing big. I'm learning. I'm growth mindset. So it's like those are attachments that are, I believe, okay,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all inward. It's all self-growth, and we hold it loosely enough that life can go, Mike, I'm going to teach you something that you don't even know right now, but you won't know it until you start to move in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
Stay soft, stay humble, stay open,
Yeah.
and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And then the third place the ego really lives is narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And what the narrative does is it enforces the outcome and it enforces the identity.
Mm. The stories. Yeah.
And one day I started just trying to be conscious about my conversation with people, how I showed up, how I talked to people. And what I was asking myself is when I was talking, I was saying, is this a story I'm telling to support an attachment I have or an identity I have about myself? Or am I actually just sharing something that actually happened?
Yeah. Is this like authentic? Is this the genuine authentic experience or the script?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I think of, for example, Evolution Project, going back, like what was the truth? What was the truth in those early stages? I had something I felt called to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'd been ignoring the call for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I was dying inside because I was ignoring my call. I could feel the lack of alignment and integrity.
Mm.
You say this, right? But you're not doing it. Those were the things that were starting to put the crack. That's where the light enters, right, Mike?
That's right.
So these cracks were starting to kind of like come out, and I couldn't really hide them anymore. And there were things that were egoically happening in my life that were just breaking me too.
Mm.
Because at that point, my real estate team was starting to go through some pretty big shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And they were good shifts, but I had identity attached to it. And having a child unexpected 10 years later. My wife and I literally the year before, we had a sit down of like, what do we want to do? We're going to be 45, 46, and our kids are all going to be moved out of the house. What do we want to do with our life? And we did the whole, where would we want to live? Where we want to do this? And then, no joke, we were pregnant within, 8 months of that conversation. And you get it. It was very much a surprise, very big surprise. And that was a shift because now she had an identity around like, I've given myself, right? I've been pregnant or breastfeeding for the last 6 years of my life. Now we've raised our kids to this point where it's like they go to school. I've got time.
Mm-hmm.
I like to play tennis. I like to do landscape design. Those are things that I have sacrificed, which, P.S., Chandy, I love you so much. Like, I'm serious. She really is like the most important person in my life, and I love her. And I have grown my love for her significantly as I've gotten out of my own egoic state and realized that like a lot of the narrative that I had given myself, which was like even good narrative, it just humbled me to make me realize like, hey dude, world doesn't revolve around you. It's a lot bigger than you. And Chandy's like it's interesting. She's like my biggest advocate,
Hmm.
but she does it in the way that she lives. She doesn't do it in the words of affirmation, which is my love language, Mike.
But you see it.
Now I
Yeah.
totally see it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Like never once did she ever say to me, "You're doing the evolution project again. Bryan, why do you go and spend 2 days and you're spending all this time hanging out with these guys?" And
Mm-hmm.
never once did she say that. Now on the flip side though, never once did she say, "What'd you do this weekend?" It was kind of just like, "I hope you had a good time."
Right.
And then what it did is it forced me to deal with my shadow,
Yeah.
which my shadow is, do I love myself enough to show up? Do I love myself enough that I can live in integrity with the things, not just that I say out loud, but actually the values, that the true values? Am I living from a place of value, right?
Mhm.
And like this, it's cool. It's like, truly, Mike, no one's benefited from the Evolution Project more than me.
Yep. Totally. Yes. I get that.
And I know it's done a lot of good.
Yeah.
So when you say like, hey, it's helped me out, like one of the questions I'd ask you is because I would love to hear this actually.
Yeah.
What was it like for you in this experience? Because I remember I
Yeah.
came over to your house.
Yeah.
I almost feel like I gave you the dog and pony show. It's like, all right, Mike, Aaron, get over here. Aaron, nudge him a little bit here.
Right.
Because you know what's funny to me? Like the money wasn't the issue, but it was a block.
It was like an excuse. Yeah. It was a reason to go, yeah, that could be reason enough to dissuade. Well, let me back up a
I
little
want to
bit.
hear it. I
Yeah,
want to hear it.
Yeah. Okay. In my own journey, similar to yours in a lot of ways, I mean, Erin was doing, she became yoga certified years prior, started doing these events and gatherings. And then Erin and I had some pretty powerful moments of like defining our purpose and figuring out our mission and
Can I
just
pause
getting
one
it on
second?
paper. Yeah.
Has Aaron been on a podcast with you yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot of podcasts, so I haven't listened to all of them.
Okay. Yes, she has.
But my thought was like, I hope the men have been able to hear the person behind a lot of this. Cause
yeah. Well, we should get her on this one. We've been on other ones together.
Okay.
So, but not on the Here Brother. We've only had one woman on our podcast so far.
Okay.
And so it's time. Yeah.
Okay.
Appreciate that. I love it.
Because she is fantastic.
She is.
So
incredible.
she's doing her work
Yes.
all along the way. And what's
Yes.
Mike doing all along the way as Aaron's doing all this stuff?
I mean, I'm interested in it. I'm into it. You know, I've always been drawn to like practices like meditation ever since I was in middle school, honestly, like
Yeah.
way back. Right. I was like, oh, this meditation thing sounds cool, but I'm not a real practitioner. I'm not like taking it anything very seriously. I'm just intrigued by some of these things. Right. So she starts to get into yoga. Mindfulness and meditation is a part of that. I'm interested in all of it. We start practicing and doing things together. So I'm along the ride and I'm supportive of it. And I'm like, this is cool. This feels like it's good for us. And it's doing things in my heart and in my mind and in my soul that feel like good fruits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we were seeing the good fruits and also just from our lens, like there was kind of this gospel centeredness in all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't sort of I don't know, like going this different path. It was kind of an integration and it felt expansive and it felt like strengthening and it was cool. So we were kind of like on this path of exploring some of these other wisdom traditions and practices and finding the truths in those, and there was kind of this expansion in that. And then we get to this point where my career, I have this rough moment, and I've told this story before, but it basically led me to going home to Erin and being like, I don't even know if I'm going to have a job next week, and I'm kind of freaking out. And she's just holding space for me beautifully. And then she goes, I think this is actually going to be a really good thing because it's going to help us figure out like, what do we really want? It was kind of like a COVID moment, like you described earlier, like time out. Let's take a step back and figure out what are we doing? Like, what are our lives really about? And we had some conversations like that before, which were productive and good, but like this one felt like a pivotal one, it was like bigger than the previous introspective moments, And so we started to map things out, and just we created what is now our like family crest and purpose statement, and we got clear on our values and on our guiding principles and our purpose statement. And so all of that had kind of like laid this foundation, and we even did some writing about the future, which was cool because now it's like, oh, that's called manifesting and or vision boarding or whatever. And we didn't really have that terminology at the time. We just were like, what do we want 5 or 10 years to look like? And we just started writing things out. And we started talking about like creating these spaces and having these gatherings and having these experiences that help us become more one, like more at one with truth, with light, with, uplifting, inspiring, connecting, all the good things, right? And so it was still pretty vague though and ambiguous, but we were like, that's our intention. We knew yoga and meditation would be part of it. We knew we wanted it to be more kind of like gospel Christ-centered. We wanted to impact families. And so we started with, similar to what you described, we reached out to some friends and we were like, hey, we're thinking of doing this family retreat thing. Would you guys want to come? And, we'll just hang out and play, but we'll also do a couple of structured things and we'll help you guys figure out this exercise that we just did, which is like, what are your core values? What are your principles? What's your purpose? And then that led to Erin doing women's retreats. And she would come back from these women's retreats that were, around yoga and some other things. And I, it just was like, man, what would a men's version look like? And at that point, I hadn't really heard of many men's retreats or men's groups, or it turns out there's a bunch of stuff out there, right? I just didn't have the awareness of it at the time, but I was kind of daydreaming, like, what would it look like? What would it be like? And then it's around that time that, I'm throwing these ideas around with Erin, and she goes, well, I think you need to meet my friend Bryan, who does this thing called the Evolution Project, because you guys went to high school together.
Yes.
And that's the connection. And it was so funny because as I was daydreaming about creating a men's retreat, a men's experience, when she tells me about you and then we arranged to meet, I'm immediately feeling like, well, I don't know if I want to like go to one.
Yeah.
Like, I just kind of want to like create one, like I kind of want to like make a thing. I don't know if I want to go and like participate in one that I don't know anything about. And so I had all the typical reservations. Like, I don't know anybody that's going to this thing. I don't know what you're all about yet because we hadn't met or dug into anything. There was just a lot of unknowns. And for me, there's fear around the unknown. I mean, I think that's pretty typical human experience, right? So there was just fear around the unknown. And I think there was also fear around excavating what was going on in my soul. And there's resistance to that. And so we talk.
Well, think about this.
Yeah.
Going back to the ego and the identity, it's like the ego's just doing its job.
Right. Protecting.
That it's 100%.
But hiding.
Yeah. It's just saying, hey, Mike, you're good, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need that, man. We're great.
Right. Meanwhile, I know that I'm hurting inside.
But that's what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
it's like, okay, cool. So, and then I feel like these are the moments where the soul, when I say soulful, if we silence the mind, the soul knows.
Yeah, I love that.
It's just like it's the thing that you wouldn't have said out loud in the moment, but you had enough faith in really your wife, and it kind of bled a little bit over into this where you're like, all right. How'd you feel like when you said like, yeah, I'm going to do this? Like, did you feel immediately like, oh man, what did I just do? Or was it like, let's do this?
It felt like a leap of faith to commit to it. It felt like, okay, I had to get really honest with myself in the process of deciding whether I was going to do this or not.
Yeah.
And I could identify that there were places where I was feeling stuck. I was, and not just stuck. I was feeling a lot of, I think the emotions that I didn't want to face or feel or deal with. There was self-criticism and judgment, and I don't know that I would define it as self-loathing because that just feels like pretty heavy. But I think we all kind of identify with that to some degree or at some point in life, and so I was feeling some degree of that. And we had just been through some major life changes, and I was still trying to figure out, like, what am I doing and what am I all about? And, I had left a full-time job, and I had always been in a full-time job my entire adult life prior to that. And suddenly I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, there was a honeymoon stage of this is awesome. And then that wears off. And then you go like,
Now
what is my life? Yeah. And so I was just in the middle of some big emotions and some judgments and brushing up against things that I had been able to avoid for a really long time because I was so busy.
So you were ripe.
I was ripe. Yeah.
So, something I think would be good to give voice to around just men's work in general. I think, so I have a really dear, it's actually a family member, actually, where we've had discussions about this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, he's actually come to the Evolution Project.
Cool.
Bless his heart. And, but after he kind of like backed away, and I was like, hey, like, I just getting feedback from him, like, what's coming up for you or whatever. And his comment was, he's like, man, it's just hard for me to hang around a bunch of broken men. And I immediately was like, well, you got a lot of judgment around that right now. And what I know is that anything that I have high judgment around is absolutely a shadow, right? It's revealing me to so like you were talking about, I was ripe for this because it's like I wanted to do these things, but then the shadow is, well, would I actually go do it myself? Which is a great start to the conversation, right?
Totally, yeah.
And, I think one of the reason I want to bring this up is that men's work meets you where you're at. That's the thing I want everyone to really, really, really understand. It's not this like, I just got a divorce, I just lost my job, I'm going through an existential crisis, which it can be.
Yep.
It absolutely can be a container for that. But it can also be for a guy like Mike that goes, I just came out of a very successful business. I've had some space. I've sat with myself. What's next? It can be from so many different places.
Yeah.
I believe, a lot of people go through, they're going through a spiritual conversation within themselves. What's their actual relationship with God and Jesus Christ and the things that they've been taught in their religion? Like, does it actually still really apply, right? My advice, my marriage,
yep.
Is it still working for me? Do we still love each other, right? My opinion is like, these are the places that I believe there's an adversary, and I believe these are the places that Satan knows how and when to poke. Because he knows that if he can get a man, ultimately, I believe, if he can get a man numb enough, that he can get them in a space where they may be making decisions that will not serve them.
Yeah.
Well, for sure in that moment. Maybe long term it will serve them because it will be the thing that awakens them.
Right. Well, and there's purpose in the opposition. Yeah.
Right. But it's like, the reason I just wanted to bring this up is like the conversation that you were having with yourself, outside looking in, right? This person that I know would have said, well, why would Mike go to the Evolution Project?
Right.
His marriage is great. He's got great kids, really successful in his job. Why would Mike go? Right? But hearing what you just said, it's like, no, there was actually very much a conversation going on inside of Mike internally.
Yep.
Not externally, which is usually the case, Mike.
Yep.
That made you go, maybe. I loved Erin's post a while ago where she talked about sometimes.
Yeah. Wasn't
the
that good?
Softening of sometimes.
Yeah.
My life's really great. And sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah.
And so you're in this space, you're like,
yeah,
okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to lean into this.
Yeah. Yeah. And once the decision was made, I didn't feel like, oh, I got to back out now. I was kind of like, okay,
you were resolved.
I was like, okay,
Decisive.
I'm going to do this.
Yes.
And come what may. And I had met and talked to you enough to get a sense of what kind of facilitator or leader that you were, that I felt like, okay, I think I can trust and go into this. And we had an important conversation about the financial part of it.
Yeah.
And I love that you pointed out the importance of being willing to invest in ourselves. And that was kind of a big deal, because that's something I resist, or feel. And then it's like, well, what beliefs are under that, you know? And so there was just some good stuff that came up in that process. And so, and this was in a short time frame. I mean, I think we talked on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and this retreat was on Friday. I mean, it was that week.
I didn't realize.
Do you remember that?
Here's the deal. I knew it was close. I didn't realize it was that close.
Yeah, it was like right then.
Because yours was kind of unique in the sense that we did it at Louis' cabin.
Yes.
Which is not the typical place.
Okay.
That we hold it at.
Cool.
And your group was 5-6 guys?
Yeah. Plus you guys, facilitators, others that were there. Yeah.
Cool.
So I got there, and it was uncomfortable at first, just because I didn't know anybody. And that's right when the ego is the loudest, right? Right when you show up in a group of men that you don't know, and you're kind of, navigating that and assessing, is this a place where I can be myself? Is this a place where I need to put up a little bit of a front or whatever? And you had this awesome process of just taking us through, breaking those things down, that amazing prompt, the invitation that you share. And it's like, what comes up for you when you read that? I remember the quote still, and I refer to it often, which you've referred to a couple times: that which is most personal is most universal.
Yeah.
Carl Rogers, right? Is that?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, it's
that's
there's
who I've
there's
seen it
quotes
attributed
where
to.
it's like,
It's like Einstein said.
Jesus, Abraham Lincoln,
right. There's many.
Buddha, sure.
Yeah. So truth, right? That was a powerful statement, and we started to just layer by layer, and you just get into it. And there were several really impactful exercises that we did that for me were heart opening and touching. And then sometimes a little bit like the awareness, right? You're just digging in, and you're going, what's really here? And it's through walking and meditations and prompts and conversation and all these different exercises. And it was just this opening up and this digging and excavating the soul. And meanwhile, I'm just finding out, I'm like, this is here. Okay, this is here too. Wow. Yeah, I'm hurting around this thing, or what, all these things are coming up. And I mean, there were a few culminating moments, but this was my first experience with breath work too. And all of the priming that led to that being the experience that it was for me was, I can see how important it was.
Yeah, you get it.
If we didn't do all that work leading up to it, it may not have had the depth of impact that it did.
By the time we breathe, it's like the rocket ship is ready to blast off.
Yeah, totally.
Something interesting though, is we've started doing is we've started introducing like mini kind of mindfulness breathwork things. Yeah. So it's like kind of prime, like you said, it's the priming of the pump.
Because it can just start to crack things open too. Yeah.
Man, I love the word softening.
Yeah.
You don't think of it like with a masculine, like that doesn't sound very masculine. But I just think it's always like, you said something so great. It's like, what's the feeling I don't want to feel?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's a softening question. Because then you say, okay, just play with it. Like, just put it out there a little bit and start to kind of, and then, you might be journaling, but you wouldn't say that stuff out loud. Right. But then in a dialogue, and that may be on a walk, or that may be in like a circle, where somebody says something, you're like, okay. And then you have the moment where you're like, I'm going to give voice to this. Yeah. There is magic, man. There is magic in giving. We talk about vernacular and how we say things. And I just think of like, there is something powerful in the voice. Yeah. And saying out loud definitive things like, what's funny is when we start, so one of the things what I try to do at the beginning of Evolution Project, I'll tell everybody, it's not like a super secret. Yeah. I try to focus on more why you're here than who you are, because who you think you are. But what do men always do, right? They're walking around the room. Hey, Mike, what do you do? Yep. And, we're talking and you're like, I'm a heart surgeon, right? And then you go, Bryan, what do you do? And I go, I'm a janitor. Right.
What are the judgments?
Now all of a sudden, immediately you're like, well, Bryan must be not very motivated. He's probably not very smart. He must be struggling.
Right.
Like immediately you've all of a sudden deductively come to this place where you've put me in a place where it's like, and by the way, whether you say that out loud or not, there is a vibration to that too,
Mm.
right? Versus, hey, my name's Bryan. What's your name? Mike. Hey, what brings you up here?
Yeah.
And you start to actually have a dialogue. And the reason I love the poem by Uriah, it's called The
Mhm.
Invitation.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I love it is it asks questions. It's like, would you howl out the silver moon, right?
Right.
What does your heart long for?
Yeah.
Can you let somebody down
Right. Can you sit with my pain and not try to fix it?
and not try to fix it?
Yeah. And your own.
I remember and that's what the next line is,
Yeah.
and your own. And I
Yeah.
remember the first time I read that, I said, how in the hell can I sit with anyone else's pain? I can't even sit with my own.
Mm. Yeah.
And that was an opening question.
Yep.
That was a softening question.
Right.
And not fix it.
Yep. Or avoid it.
Or
numb
avoid
from it.
exactly
Or, yeah.
all those things
Yeah.
that we do.
Yeah.
And the society, I mean, truly, Mike, the world is set up to fail us because it will feed into all of these carnal temptations of comfort, of dopamine, of ease. And like, there's a softening word, right? And those things will make you soft, but not in the right way.
Mm.
You lose personal integrity with yourself.
Yeah.
And I try not to use the word you, but I do think that is a universal thing. That is the benefit of that. That is the byproduct of a life of ease.
Mm-hmm.
You said you were on the vacation for a period of time, and then one day you woke up and you're like, I got to get my rudder back in the water.
Yeah.
Because have you ever read the book by Napoleon Hill called Outwitting the Devil?
No.
So it is a wonderful book, and it's written in the light of Napoleon Hill is ultimately having kind of this gestalt conversation with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically brings the devil in, and he's going to interview the devil, and then he's going to ask the devil, how do you do this, do that? And so he's
Mhm.
getting into the mindset of the devil,
Mm.
kind of like a screw tape letters-esque
Yeah.
thing.
Sure.
And one of the main things that the devil tells Napoleon Hill, by the way, what's cool about this book is he wrote this book and then he put it away. He never published it while he was alive.
Hmm.
And so he's passed on. They're going through his stuff. They find this manuscript or this book that's written called Outwitting the Devil, and then they publish it later on. And the number one thing the devil says is that if I can get men to drift,
Mm.
if I can just get them to drift, I've got them.
Wow.
Because they're
That's
just
profound.
they're just out in the ocean.
Yeah.
And he's like, and that's because I know they're not going to put their rudder down for anything.
Right. Wow.
And I'm like, so at this place, with men's work, by the way, we need to finish the story.
Yeah.
But I think what's so powerful about this thing with men's work, and the reason it's becoming more mainstream would be the right way,
Sure.
is because it's time.
Yeah. People are feeling it, like feeling
And we've
called to it.
and we've seen the repercussions of toxic masculinity and
Mhm.
drifting.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Men that are just not showing up in their life, period,
Yep.
right? Or men that are showing up in their life with so much ego, so much control
Yeah.
that it's given these generationally, right? It's created these rifts and these byproducts where now these children of these
Mm-hmm.
men of generations, right, are coming up and being like, maybe like hitting my kid with a belt when he's done something wrong isn't probably the best approach.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe it's actually just sitting him down and going like, hey, what's going on?
Right. Yeah.
And how's that for, like you talk about real masculinity. It's like so I just feel like the world is primed
Yeah.
for this
For sure.
work.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'll just come back to, we were kind
Yeah.
of the story. I had just a profound breakthrough
What was your profound breakthrough?
that I was worthy of love. And I didn't have to keep the self-judgment, the self-criticism, the self-loathing. I didn't have to hold on to that anymore because it was a connection with God where I felt love from him, and then I could feel it for myself. And then I could feel it for every person in my life, including those that I was in the middle of maybe feeling like, oh, we're having a little bit of a rift right now, or we're feeling off, or there's tension. And I was even feeling that with one of my kids. Like we just were kind of not feeling connected for a while, and that was bothering me. And once I had that release of all the stuff I was holding, and then a connection with God, it was easy to feel that love for that child. You know, nothing changed in terms of he didn't come and say sorry, or like nothing happened other than the internal change that I felt. And then I was able to show up for him differently.
Yeah.
And it was a pivotal moment. And then of course, all the thoughts that I had been having previously of what would a men's thing look like, and how could I integrate this, helping people define their purpose, and, you know, all the stuff that Aaron and I had been working on. I came to your retreat. I had that experience. I had just a release, a breakthrough, and then I was on my way. Like I just felt completely motivated and liberated, and it was a pivotal, life-changing moment. And you even knew before I went that I was thinking of doing something, and you were like, yes. You know, you weren't like seeing that as competition or a threat in any way. You were like, come and experience it, and let's talk after. Yeah. And we did. And then I, like you did, I called some of my friends and was like, I went to lunch with some guys and was like, hey, do you want to come and try this thing that I'm going to put on? And like, I'm still figuring it out, but it's going to be cool, you know? And they came.
Right, that's right.
And we
Way
had,
to say yes.
I know. And we had this incredible experience. And then you came to one of those, and like, and it's just, and then it has evolved. And like you've said to me before, like everyone has their own evolution. And that was it was like a key moment of my evolution. And so thank you.
Yeah.
And it introduced me to some incredible people and practices. And I'm grateful for you, brother. Yeah, I love you. So any closing words that you could share?
I just want to reference one thing. When you were talking, it made me think of this, though. You replaced a narrative.
Yeah. It's for me, it's about identifying the false, the limiting beliefs, the lies that we are fed from whatever the adversary, our ego, our generational stuff. There's so much there, right? That can impact our psyches, our hearts, our minds. And you figure out what is that thing, and then you can challenge it. And you can say, is that really true? Is it always true? Maybe it's just sometimes true, right? Or maybe it doesn't need to be a part of my programming anymore. And then you find the truth. And when that light comes in, it scatters the darkness and it disperses the lies. And so, it's light and truth.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love that, dude. I was going to say, like, what do I say to that? It's just like, that is amen. I mean, that's really it.
Yeah.
You know, the invitation that I would extend to anybody listening to this, I mean, high probability the person listening to this already is engaged in the work in some way, right? You know, we're often motivated by like the carrot or the stick, right? I like the carrot more than the stick. But sometimes the stick serves a purpose, right? You know, the thing that I try to get people to realize is it's your life.
It's your life. Yeah.
And you want to know the ultimate just leveling the field of play, is that you're going to die. I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Now, what I find interesting is usually everyone knows of the story, right? Maybe even really personal in your life, right? I know Aaron's sister passed away, right? And that could be cancer. Yep. That could be a car accident. That could be a lot of things, right?
Mental illness.
Mental illness. Yeah. And the thing that I come back to all the time is, it's my life. How crazy is it that God's put us on this earth with all these beautiful things? Mountains and streams and lakes. And I'm going to go skiing today, Mike. We're not going down south anymore. It's too cold.
Okay.
And he's given us all this stuff. And yet, I could choose to focus on all of the things in my life that just aren't great. And I sit there and think, as a parent, like, how great would that be, right? I've got this one kid where I'm like, anything, man. Like, I just want you to have the best life. And I keep coming back to him. Yeah, but if this was different, right? This and that. And to me, someone's life will radically change when they just land in these deep truths.
Mm-hmm.
And the deepest truth is, I am.
Yeah. I exist.
I exist. I love. I experience. And life is too great. And really being open to accepting all of it, the pain,
Mm-hmm.
the failures, the things you don't want to feel. The reality is the joy is often behind all those things. And sometimes
Yeah.
it takes a long time to come to those places. But I just think that's why I'm such an advocate, like with men's work in general.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, man. There ain't no way that Mike Allen, even as his best self, is going to be able to affect and impact all the men.
Right.
Same with Bryan Hurd.
Yep.
Fill in the blank for anyone in a space like this. So what's the work? The work is to show up authentically with an open heart, moving forward, inviting people into the conversation. And like one of the things I'm most proud about with the Evolution Project is that it has been a catalyst for people like Mike
Mm-hmm.
and other people that have gone down paths, right? And they've gone on to do work and important work and things.
Yeah.
And I just sit there and think, yeah, that's right.
That ripple effect. Yeah.
That is it. And the reality is like, did I ever come up with the idea? No, of course. Where we started. Let's begin where we started.
Yeah.
We're all living on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
And the reality is when we can live in a, like authentically true, centered, grounded, loving, high vibrational state. I just think God can say, man, I can do a lot with that guy.
Yeah. Changes the world.
Changes the world. And thanks for having me here today.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for the impact you've had in my life. Truly. Where can people find you?
I was gonna make a funny guy, like any taco stand, you know.
Nice.
So from an evolution project standpoint, myevolutionproject.com.
Cool.
We do 4 events a year right now.
Okay.
2 in the spring, 2 in the fall.
Nice.
And
we'll put links in the show notes for those that want to look into it. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. And yeah, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.